Doing a little live video here, Pacific Northwest, just a few, 20, 30 minutes from the Pacific Ocean, out here in the mountains of the great Pacific Northwest. Anyway, we're going to do some live YouTube videos. And yes, I've retired from the chainsaw industry, but I still have quite a bit of knowledge about the chainsaws. And I want to share that with a lot of the guys. I get a lot of questions, and I try to answer all those questions, is what we plan on doing. And I do have a few questions here. I'll go over here. Let me find them here. I get this question a lot. Which is better, the auto-tune M-Tronics or the old school saws? Well, I worked on all of them. I started working on chainsaws back in the 70s and very familiar with the muscle saws from that area. We didn't realize they were muscle saws until later on, but they were just high performance saws, well ahead of their time. McCullough's Super Pro 125s, had the steel 90s, 075, 76s. Homelight was big, 650, 750 Supers. All those great saws. And they're highly collectible now. And I've had a lot of them, and I've worked on a lot of them, sold a lot of them. And then, of course, we've transitioned into the newer saws with the high-tech stuff on them. When we're talking about high-tech, we're talking M-Tronics, or we're talking about the auto-tune. Husqvarna got the auto-tune. Husqvarna actually invented, the Swedes actually came up with the auto-tune. They developed it, and it was such a good feature that they were required to let other manufacturers use it. And of course, Steel got a hold of it, and they turned it into the M-Tronics. And it's very popular on both saws. And I get questions all the time: are they reliable? Because there was a lot of issues at first. And I'll tell you the truth: at first, everybody was skeptical, and I was too, of the M-Tronics or the auto tunes, whichever one you want to call it. We're talking about the same thing, just different manufacturers. A lot of bugs, a lot of issues, a lot of disappointed people. But they've transitioned and had several different improvements on that. And right now, it is very, very impressive and very reliable. We'll go over some of the issues that they do currently have with it. And it's not bad issues. What I've found on the Steel M-Tronics, they have some very fine wires coming from the module up over to the solenoid carburetor. And those fine wires, over time, with all the vibrations, they would break. The red wire would actually break, but it would, when the saw was starting, it wasn't enough vibration to separate that wire. Once that saw got running, just instantly it would break the connection, and the saw would die, run and die, run and die. Sounds just like lack of fuel, because you would test it and you'd still have fire to the spark plug, but it just wasn't reading the solenoid from the control box. And I did a bunch of testing on that and discovered that and got onto it. Now, if you are zeroing in on that, if you think you got a problem with that 362, there are two different wiring harnesses, and they're very different. So go with your serial number. If you go to try to pick up the wiring harness, use your serial number. That way you get the exact one you need. Husqvarna's different issues. They had some run issues with theirs. Mainly theirs was a hot start. The auto-tune wasn't correcting itself for the hot starts, and so they transitioned into a newer control system on it. And those problems have pretty much disappeared. You do need to locate a dealer that is really highly trained in that. It's not like it used to be where anybody could just take apart carburetor and fix a saw and diagnose it a lot easier. These are a lot tougher. You do have to plug them into a computer to get the correct diagnostics started. And sometimes that's a dead end. And then you got to fall back onto your diagnosing, troubleshooting, pressure vacuum testing, and stuff like that. It's pretty high tech, but if the guy's wanting to learn that, he could do it. It's all doable, and we'll try to help you out with that. And let me look here, see what else we got here. Another question I get asked quite a bit about is the Jonsered example, the 630 compared to the 61 Husqvarna. Are they the same internally, externally? What's different about them? They look similar. Husqvarna bought out Jonsered years ago, and that name was very strong in Sweden and different European countries, so they kept the name. And you'll see it here in the States. And yes, they are almost twins. There are some cosmetic differences. One being the handlebars are different. The mounting bracket on the fuel tank, you can't take a 61 Husky handlebar, half wrap or full wrap, and put it onto the J-Red and vice versa. You just can't do it. What guys would do, we call it morphing the saw. We would take a fuel tank if they really wanted that Husqvarna feel compared to the J-Red feel. They would take the fuel tank off of the Husqvarna, put it built right onto the J-Red, put the wrap handlebars on, and basically you got a hybrid Jonsered Husqvarna. And a lot of the other components, the starters are a little different, but then again, you can do some morphing and change things around and make it work. Internally, they're almost identical. You won't find much difference on the internal components, the ignition, the flywheels, clutches, oilers, all those major components, pretty much interchangeable. I have seen guys take a half crankcase off a 61 just for fun and put it on a J-Red so you can get that red-orange color on the crankcase. No, you're not supposed to do that, but yeah, it's a lot of fun to do. And it's all doable. Let me look at something else here we got. Oh, yeah. This is I get this all the time. Bars and chains. What works on chainsaws? And comparable to the Husqvarna is a good example. The bars, a lot of guys will run on their 4 and 5 cube saws. West Coast guys run a long bar. East Coast guys run a short bar. Long bar on the West Coast, say on a 4 cubic inch saw, would be a 32 inch, very common. And the way they do it is, of course, the saw has to have a 3/8 and 7-tooth drive sprocket, and they put the long bar on there, and then they use a skip tooth chain, skip meaning the sequence of teeth. Full comp, they're real close together, one right after the other. Skip tooth, there is some spacing with drivers in between. Easier to pull those skip tooth through the fiber of the wood. You got a lot more power to do it. If you put a full comp on a 32 inch and stuck it in a log, you would notice the saw dogging down, we call it, or losing a little bit of power because it's taking more energy to pull that chain through the fiber of the wood. Other things that you can do is you can speed up the chain by changing from a 3/8 to a 3/8 7-tooth to a 3/8 8-tooth. And out here on the West Coast, they even make a 9 and a 10-tooth drive sprocket, which would really tremendously pick up the speed. They didn't do that to actually cut the big wood. It was used for limbing. It was real popular years ago for the guys to have a saw, several saws on the landing set up just to bump the knots and the limbs. And of course, they picked the speed up to just zip, 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 zip. They do have a 32 inch bar, but now you go to stick it in a log, that saw won't have any power. East Coast guys and Canadians and some of our southern customers, a lot of them run these short bars. A long bar on the East Coast would probably be a 20 inch, would be a very long bar. And I have set up a lot of my customers on the East Coast with the long bars with the understanding of running a 7-tooth with a skip tooth chain. And I did a lot of the Sylvie race grind chains using a Sylvie SDM4 grinder. Just razor sharp, just an unbelievable cut. And with a 24, 28 inch skip tooth, just amazing, absolutely amazing. Then again, be aware you got to change the drive sprocket from 8 to the 7, or vice versa if you're just knocking off limbs and stuff like that. Be aware you usually have to, not all the time, but usually have to add an extra drive link to the chain count to take up for that 8-tooth or back and forth, vice versa. It's the different things you can do. Well, guys, that's just a little short blurb of what we got going here. Tell you what, if you would really like to email me some questions, you're sure welcome to do that. sawking@hotmail.com. Just a minute here. And of course, we're going to try to do this live maybe once a week. And we will include all the questions we get on that in there. And so if you got any questions on that, email the chainsaw guy, sawking@hotmail.com. Well, this is going to conclude this short YouTube video. But if you got any questions, you know how to get a little chainsaw guy.